What if I told you that the most powerful people in the world are not the ones you see on TV, but the ones you don't see? The ones who have access to the corridors of power, the ones who can influence the decisions of governments, the ones who can shape the policies and laws that affect millions of lives. Welcome to the world of lobbying and corporate interests. In this video, we will explore some of the most controversial and conspiratorial aspects of lobbying and corporate interests. We will also examine how lobbying and corporate interests affect various domains of society, such as health, environment, education, and democracy. But before we dive into the details, let's first define what lobbying and corporate interests are. Lobbying is the act of trying to persuade or influence public officials or policymakers to support or oppose a certain cause or issue. Corporate interests are the goals or agendas of corporations or businesses that seek to maximize their profits or power. Lobbying and corporate interests often go hand in hand, as corporations use lobbying as a means to advance their interests. But who are the lobbyists and the corporations? And what are their motives and methods? The lobbyists are individuals or groups who represent the interests of their clients or employers, who are usually corporations, industries, or organizations. The lobbyists can be lawyers, consultants, former politicians, or experts in various fields. The lobbyists use various strategies to lobby public officials or policymakers, such as providing information, offering advice, making donations, organizing campaigns, or forming coalitions. The corporations are entities that are legally recognized as having rights and responsibilities similar to those of individuals. The corporations can be private or public, domestic or foreign, small or large, in various sectors or industries. The corporations have various objectives and interests, such as increasing their market share, reducing their costs, expanding their influence, or avoiding regulations. The lobbyists and the corporations claim that their activities are legitimate and beneficial for society. They claim that they provide valuable information and perspectives to public officials and policymakers, who may not have the time or expertise to research every issue. They claim that they promote democracy and pluralism by giving voice to different groups and interests in society. They claim that they foster innovation and growth by supporting free enterprise and competition. However, not everyone agrees with these claims. Many people argue that lobbying and corporate interests are corrupt and harmful for society. Some people argue that lobbying and corporate interests distort the public interest and undermine the common good by favoring the wealthy and powerful over the poor and weak. Some people argue that lobbying and corporate interests subvert democracy and accountability by influencing the outcomes of elections, legislation, or regulation. Some people argue that lobbying and corporate interests endanger health and environment by opposing or weakening measures that protect public health and environmental quality. Are these arguments valid? Or are they just exaggerated accusations? The truth is hard to determine, because lobbying and corporate interests are complex and opaque, and have different impacts on different domains and groups of society. It is difficult to measure and evaluate the costs and benefits of lobbying and corporate interests, and to compare them with alternative scenarios or solutions. It is also difficult to isolate the influence of lobbying and corporate interests from other factors that affect society, such as culture, ideology, or media. But what is clear is that lobbying and corporate interests have a significant impact on society, and that not everyone benefits or suffers equally from it. This is one of the realities that confronts society and challenges its legitimacy and integrity. To illustrate this point, let us look at some historical examples of lobbying and corporate interests in action. One example is the tobacco industry, which has been accused of using lobbying and corporate interests to deny or downplay the health risks of smoking for decades. According to a report by the World Health Organization, WHO, the tobacco industry has employed a variety of tactics to influence policymakers and public opinion, such as funding scientific research that supports its claims, creating front groups that advocate for its interests, sponsoring media campaigns that promote its products, or bribing officials to block or weaken anti-smoking measures. The report estimates that the tobacco industry spends billions of dollars annually on lobbying activities worldwide. The result is that millions of people die every year from tobacco-related diseases, while the tobacco industry continues to profit from its sales. Another example is the fossil fuel industry, which has been accused of using lobbying and corporate interests to deny or delay the action on climate change for years. According to a report by the International Monetary Fund, IMF, the fossil fuel industry receives about $5.2 trillion in subsidies annually, which includes direct transfers, tax breaks, and environmental costs. The report also states that the fossil fuel industry spends hundreds of millions of dollars annually on lobbying activities in the United States alone. The result is that the fossil fuel industry continues to emit greenhouse gases that contribute to global warming, while the world faces the consequences of climate change, such as extreme weather, sea level rise, and biodiversity loss. A third example is the pharmaceutical industry, which has been accused of using lobbying and corporate interests to influence the regulation and pricing of drugs for its own benefit. According to a report by the Center for Responsive Politics, CRP, the pharmaceutical industry spent about $4.7 billion on lobbying activities in the United States from 1998 to 2020, making it the top lobbying spender among all industries. The report also states that the pharmaceutical industry has donated millions of dollars to political campaigns and candidates, and has hired thousands of former government officials as lobbyists or consultants. The result is that the pharmaceutical industry enjoys high profits and market power, while the public faces high drug prices, limited access, and safety issues. These are just some examples of how lobbying and corporate interests have affected various domains of society. There are many more, such as the defense industry, the tech industry, the agribusiness industry, and so on. Some of these industries may have positive or negative effects on society, depending on the perspective and the context. But they all demonstrate the power and influence of lobbying and corporate interests in shaping policies and laws that affect millions of lives. These are some of the most controversial and conspiratorial aspects of lobbying and corporate interests. There are many more, such as the origin, history, and legality of lobbying and corporate interests, the role and influence of lobbying and corporate interests in international affairs, or the future and alternatives of lobbying and corporate interests. Some of these aspects may have some truth or merit to them, while others may be completely false or absurd. But they all reflect a common concern and distrust of lobbying and corporate interests, and their power over society. Lobbying and corporate interests are fascinating subjects for research and debate. They reveal a hidden side of society that is often overlooked or ignored by mainstream sources. They also challenge us to question our assumptions and beliefs about how society works. But we should also be careful not to fall into paranoia or fantasy when dealing with lobbying and corporate interests. We should always seek evidence and logic before accepting any claims or theories about them. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.